Hello guys, it's Apocalypse6 here, back with another video. This time we are playing against Rug Delver, and I'm trying something a little bit different. I have already played this game, and I'm sort of doing commentary over this recording. Now here we see a hand with two Loams and no threat, basically just Deathrite Shaman in terms of our threats. The first Loam is good because we can get good value off of it, but the second one's relatively dead. So this is, functionally a 6-card hand, and also it doesn't have, any lock pieces or any really good threats, where we're sort of relying on Deathrite Shaman to do the heavy lifting. So we're going to mull it. Now this hand is pretty good because we have a turn 1 Chalice. Unfortunately, our Deathrite Shaman is dead in that case, but that's a sacrifice we're willing to make to lock the opponent out of like probably 20 spells or whatever. And our opponent is playing Rug Delver, as you can see by drop into Deathrite Shaman. At this point, it's very likely rather than certain. And so, considering the fact that they could daze us off of Chalice, an alternate line is to play to fetch out a basic and get a Deathrite Shaman. Establishing a mana base is like one of the most important things you can do in this matchup, and also, playing land into Mana Dork is good for later Zeniths, and then this play also helps us play around daze on Chalice no matter what, because we can make 3 mana next turn even through this Force of Will. And also we baited out a Force of Will against a card that was like fine to have, but nothing amazing in the matchup. Okay, yeah. The downside of playing waiting an extra turn to Chalice is our opponent now has a second threat. But if we ever resolve any sort of Knight in particular, but certain other ground creatures also help. Scavenging Ooze, for example, Qasali Pridemage, they race or stonewall the Nimble Mongoose pretty well. So here we're just going to resolve our Chalice on one, and then we're going to, try to land a threat. And if we resolve Chalice and we land a threat, then we have a very small chance of losing the game. It's also like, as I said, it was like the most important thing you can do in this matchup is to establish a mana base. If, for example, our opponent if we had gotten a Bayou, our opponent could, force Deathrite Shaman, Wasteland, Bayou, and we'd be super behind because we have like no permanence, and our opponent has a Delver. That was that was the explanation for our play on turn 1. Okay, great. Now we drew a Knight of the Reliquary, which means we can continue to play around daze, and we don't have to use the Screen Sun Zenith this turn, which means we have potentially 2 threats, which also helps us play around Force. Now the thing with daze in this matchup is maybe against Delver in general, you sort of have to agree whether or not you're playing around daze the whole game, because it really doesn't make sense to play around daze for 2 turns, and then on the 3rd turn, if you're resolving a spell of any importance at all, to tap out. You're sort of hoping that the opponent says, oh, well, it's sort of late, so let me brainstorm my dazes away. And if you don't have a read that happened, then the daze will just be live against you. So here we had the kind of hand where we have been playing around daze the entire game so far, and we can, by drawing this fetch land, we can continue to do so. Usually in this matchup, we don't have the luxury of sitting back a little bit and playing around the daze. So generally, what I do is I present my opponent with good daze targets starting on turn 1, and if they don't have it, I can just play the rest of the game as if they don't have it. And there will always be things that our opponent counters, but usually the threat density of the deck is high enough that we can just sort of run them out of counter magic. And the benefit of this is we get to be a lot faster. If our hand realistically can't wait an extra turn to do everything it's doing, and we try to get it to wait an extra turn, then our opponent gets ahead on tempo, and that's pretty bad for us in some cases. So here we are. We could get a Scavenging Ooze, we could get a Knight. There's really no argument for anything else. The reason I don't get a Scavenging Ooze here is just the I figured I might want to sort of accelerate out the combo rather than spend my mana sort of eating graveyards. If I remember correctly, there's no creatures in either graveyard, so Scavenging Ooze is currently not a source of life gain. It's sort of mainly there to keep Mongoose off of Threshold. I probably should have activated Knight on the end step, maybe to draw a card, but definitely to get a Thespian stage. That was probably just a misplay, not to activate the first Knight. Okay, and our opponent loses the only threat that could get through, and from then on, it's clear we'll slowly win the game. So, a lot of other seasoned Loam players like Swords to Plowshares against every deck, every Delver deck, and I generally don't, because most Delver decks are way slower than Rug Delver, and we don't need sort of the late game nombo of drawing swords after a Chalice. But in this matchup specifically, Rug Delver is fast enough that we really do need all the cheap plays that we can make, and Chalice is so good against them that it really doesn't matter if we have extra cards that are dead. Like against Grixis, they can have Young Pyromancer, they can have Angler against Bug, they can just play a Tarmogoyf for a True Name or Bob or whatever. These decks have higher curves, so it's not just game over. Which is why we sort of want it's not Chalice is not the end all be all, so we should have Chalice be the best Chalice it could be. I'm sort of toying with bringing in Thalia, but generally that's a bad idea. It's very easy to get locked under your own Thorn effects. Sort of in theory it's good because it doubles the cost of all their cantrips, which is a huge effect. But if you play Thalia and then they Wasteland you, and they had a threat out, you're just super behind there. We also boarded in a Choke as a 3-mana, if you're not winning right now I'm winning sort of a card. It's not the best, but it's fine. We boarded out some number of Bobs because generally against aggressive decks whose main plan is, hey, I'm going to quickly reduce your life total, we don't want to be trading life for cards. Any amount of card advantage we get will almost certainly be enough to out-card advantage them. So we don't need a ton of this effect. This hand is great. It's a turn 1 Mox. So again, we sort of make them have a daze, and if they don't have a daze, we just continue playing Magic. And then we also have now 2 pieces of card advantage / selection, or 3, I guess, in Loam. So if our opponent has Wastelands, we can effectively fight against that. We're gonna throw away the dual, get a basic, just to not be susceptible to the Wasteland, because even if we sort of in the late game we can run them out of Wastelands, we can put all our mana sources where they belong, post Wasteland, that it still buys them turns. Oh, okay, so it seems like our opponent just kept a hand that couldn't beat Chalice on one, which, considering how important that card is in that matchup, I think if you're familiar at all with the matchup, you should have a plan for that. All right, well, thanks for watching. See you next time.